disagreement. So just to very quickly go through the first few of our community agreements. So you are welcome here, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, all are welcome. Please make space for others. Critique ideas, not people, assume positive intentions, and participate to the extent that makes you comfortable. Please always remember to describe any visuals or anything in the chat. So if you come on and are responding to something in the chat, please remember that those who are watching the recording back later won't be able to see that. So if you could just briefly summarize what it is you're responding to or anything like that, it will help make the conversation flow a bit better. In addition to that, we will absolutely be sharing that feedback form throughout. And if you have any questions at all, drop myself or Yasser a message. Other than that, I'd like to hand directly over to Virna and her team to go ahead and get started with this session, which is the reason you're all here. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and stop sharing.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and you're very welcome. I can see it's not a very big group. I just wonder, instead of us just diving in, maybe it would be nice if you want to put in the chat where you're joining from, and perhaps just say why you're interested in assessment. I mean, it might seem obvious, but why are you particularly interested in assessment? Because I'd like to see where people are from. And also, I'm going to have to try and find the chat myself here. Okay, I found it. And if you hear a little noise, ding, 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 it's because I'm actually sitting on a bicycle. I've got a bicycle desk. So let's see. So I'm actually joining from London, the outskirts of London. Let's see if I can see. From Sheffield, okay. Tim, hi, Tim. Exactly, precisely. Well, that says it all. Yeah, key part. Yeah. Yeah, Jenny, we don't want to that yet. Good. Cape Town, wow. So Sukaina, right? Lovely name. See, Sukaina, yeah? I hope I'm saying it properly. And Wisconsin, wow. Great. Fabulous. I know I've got colleagues here from the London area. Chambersburg, PA in the US. Ah. So I know that these MYFest has got quite a lot of following in the US. Yes, so maybe we get a lot of guests from the US. I'm wondering if you're all in academic roles or perhaps you do different. Yeah, Christina. Yeah. Welcome. I've got. Oh, nice, Cairo. Very good. So we literally have Minnesota. Wow, we literally have representatives from nearly all the continents. Not quite. Anybody from Australia now, or elsewhere in Asia, or the islands, remote islands? Who knows? Well, we'll get to know you a little bit during this session. So this is a hands-on session. It's something that we would like you to get involved with. So I'm associate professor and PG Cert course leader at Ravensbourne University, London. Now, in case you haven't, you don't know what PG Cert is, it is a staff development course that supports academics in particular do their job better in terms of being more involved in SOTL, the scholarship of teaching and learning, and support their development. So that's basically staff development really is my world. And so for many years, I've been interested in supporting staff come to grips with the tricky areas of assessment. Because as somebody put in the chat, and we know there is this famous quote from David Bowd, students can escape bad teaching. For example, they don't go to the lessons or they ignore the lessons, but they can't escape assessment or bad assessment, let's say, because unless, if they want to be certified and qualified, they have to go through assessment. So assessment is a vital part of the student journey. And it's something, actually, it's supposed to be something not just useful, but somehow joyful, if possible, because it's about gauging the students' learning and having those conversations, etc. But often, oh, my phone is, but often it's becomes quite, let's call it tricky, maybe difficult, both for students and for staff. And actually, sometimes it's literally traumatic. And so today we're going to talk about three. Oh, sorry.
Please try again.
Siri wants to talk to me. Sorry about that. So today we're going to talk about three different aspects of assessment. So I'm going to try and share if I can. So I should have my colleagues here, Christina, Tola, and I don't know if Catherine managed to join because she couldn't find the link.
I'm here, but
Yes, Catherine. Hi. Good. Fantastic. Okay. So I've got my three wonderful colleagues. Would you mind just briefly maybe saying what your roles are so that our colleagues here can understand your perspective? So maybe Catherine, as you're on the microphone, you want to tell us what's your role?
Hi, everyone. I am a course leader at Ravensbourne University, managing the business management with foundation year business management course and the international business management and business management with fashion. So that's my role. That's my main role.
So what's interesting is regarding assessment that you set up assessment regimes for your own cohorts, but also for your department and for your teams. So that's quite interesting. So we've got then, thank you. Then we've got Christina and Tola. Would you like to go, Christina? What's your role?
So I'm one of the senior lecturers at Ravensbourne as well, and I actually teach global marketing and sustainability. So my focus is really on driving students to becoming global citizens and embracing, purpose. So that's really my area.
Thank you.
Obviously, assessment is very important in driving purpose.
Exactly. Very good. And Tola, what about your role?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tola, and I'm a lecturer in digital marketing and business management. I have, yes, a passion in finding out about how students learn through feedback and also assessment. So, yes, very interested.
Thank you. That's quite interesting because Ravensbourne University is not a very big institution, and we've always been traditionally quite an art, design, media institution. But in the last few years, the big growth has been in computing and business. And so actually, our three colleagues here represent the new Ravensbourne, we can say. And so obviously, like babies with the teething issues, when you grow very quickly, sometimes also systems need to catch up, etc. So they've experienced assessment as they are literally developing and making it better. So instead of making slides, I've created a Padlet where you will be asked, all of you here, to add your ideas. However, I'm going to just start by using it myself now to present. That Padlet can also do a slides presentation, although sometimes it's not so good, the slides. Okay, let's see if you can see that. Can you see the slides? Sorry, not the slides, the Padlet. Can you see the Padlet?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay, thank you. Fantastic. Okay, so what I've done here, I've set out a little introduction I'm going to give you, the evidence base. Why are we talking about assessment? And this title, how can assessment design support student self-regulation? And rethinking tasks, briefs, and feedback. That's what the three areas. So what we thought we would do is something a little bit different, maybe. So we're going to have a little panel discussion. So we have Christina, Tola, and Catherine. And the questions we're going to have are here in this Padlet. So I'm going to just move it a little bit across here. And so the questions are going to be regarding assessment briefs, like just in case you don't call them that way in your part of the world. They are the instructions documents, the documents that we give to the students to introduce and explain what they're supposed to do for their assessment. Sometimes they're embedded in a module guide, sometimes they're separate. In the UK, they're commonly known as assessment briefs. But I know in other countries, they are called something else, or they are not even called in the sense they are just integrated in other documents. But we're talking about the document, the instructions. You were interested in the actual instructions. Because to perform a task, when you're given instructions, you need to be able to understand those instructions. And then the second one, assessment tasks, the actual outputs, what the students make, do, write to fulfill the assessment requirements. And the third aspect is the assessment feedback. Of course, feedback can be in other ways. It's not just assessment feedback, but because we're talking about assessment, we're just talking about assessment feedback. And how can that help students in terms of self-regulation? So we have these questions, and we're going to have a little panel discussion. And then you're going to have the chance to add your own ideas, everybody here in the room, to this Padlet. So I will give you the link when it's time for you to use it. I won't give it to you right now, just because sometimes people then get a bit distracted and they go off on a tangent. So just to keep everybody in the room during the panel. But as soon as the panel is over, I will put the link in the chat, and then you can add your own ideas here. So I hope you're familiar with Padlet, but I can tell you later how to do that. So briefly, let's just clarify something, because the title is How Can Assessment Design Support Students' Self-Regulation? What's this self-regulation? What does that mean? So self-regulation in this case, what we mean in assessment, to a student's ability to monitor and manage their own learning process, particularly in relation to assessment tasks. So what we are interested in, how can we support students so that they can, by themselves, autonomously from us as much as possible, both monitor and manage the learning process in relation to assessment. So we provide them the tools, the abilities, the supports they need so that they can do it themselves. So that's what we mean here by self-regulation, right? So, well, why are we interested in this? Well, what are the key research highlights? I'm just going to open this. That's it. So this work that we've been doing follows and expands on prior research. And there isn't really so much about assessment briefs, but of course, about assessment tasks and feedback, there is huge amounts of literature. So in the UK, there's been a very interesting piece of research by Evans and Waring in 2024, and they've focused on self-regulatory approaches to assessment. So they're particularly interested in this. And what they're trying to really highlight is the fact that the more that we can support students self-regulate, the better results they will get, and they will learn not just about the assessment, but they will learn about learning. So it's that meta learning that we are also supporting when we help students self-regulate. Then there is a guidance that has been written in the form of a research. And so all of these references will be in the Padlet, so you will have them, about designing effective assessment briefs. So Gilbert and Megar, they've written this guidance where it really shows how we should not just focus on the task, that's usually the main focus, but what about the brief itself, the instructions? Are they accessible? Are they easy to follow? Do they make sense? Do they help the students self-regulate the actual instructions? So that guidance is to support us do it in a more accessible way in particular. Then, of course, there's quite a lot of work around the assessment criteria and process. And there's been a very interesting sort of project, this was, by Russ, Price and O'Donovan in 2003. So that's actually 20 years ago. But it was a research project they did. And it was about specifically this. It's interesting, I thought, because these are very experienced colleagues. They were focusing on improving students' understanding of assessment criteria and processes. And one aspect they focused on was the assessment brief, how to make that better for the students to operate in. Then there is a more recent research by Walsh, and this is a lovely colleague, Elaine. We met, in fact, a couple of weeks ago in Manchester, precisely. And she talks about the role of effective communication in reducing assessment-related anxiety. So she comes from the perspective that because assessment is often connected with high levels of anxiety from the part of the students, the more we communicate, the better we communicate the assessment requirements, and she's actually created a whole framework around that, then the more likely we are to reduce anxiety, at least in that aspect. There will be things that we can't affect outside of our direct sphere of influence, but we have got a direct influence. We can affect the way the assessment is communicated. So that's quite interesting research there. Then, of course, this also links to Maha Bali and colleagues who've done work to do with compassionate and empathetic assessment design. It's part of this. So thinking about the whole regime, the assessment task, how is that presented and communicated, and then the feedback, how can that help? And then, of course, there's quite a lot about feedback. I think I really like the work done by David Nichol. And he really talks very much about this idea of self-regulation in terms of self-assessment in learning, helping students understand enough the criteria and use them, practice using them, so that they can self-assess before we assess them as academics. So it's not just that the students produce something and here, is this good enough? But first of all, they tell themselves, right, okay, according to the criteria here, which I understand because they've been communicated and discussed, right, how am I faring? Do I have a sense of where I am at in relation to those criteria? So good feedback practices should do this, should enhance self-assessment, self-judgment. And then I've done some work around inclusive assessment and feedback design through UDL, University Design for Learning approaches. So I just only wanted to give you an overview that, of course, there's a lot of research going on regarding assessment and feedback, but not so much about assessment briefs. And of course, the work that we are doing internally to support our students and what we're discussing today really builds on all of this evidence base, which is already there. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because I could be here a long time talking about assessment-related research. So the references are there in the Padlet, and I will share them with you because I'll share the Padlet in a minute. So you can have a look yourself to those references. So we're going to go now onto the panel because I'm aware of time. And we're going to look at these 3 questions. So I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. Let's see if I can... I don't know whether you are aware of this, but what you can do on Zoom is that, sorry, not on Zoom, with Padlet, is that you can open, there you go. So the only thing is I have to stop sharing this. And I need to share this other one. Okay, so I'm going to open now that first section as a separate Padlet so that we can see those questions. And I'm going to ask my colleagues here for the panel. The problem is now, which one is it? I don't know. Let's try this one. I think it's this one. Yeah. Okay, good. If you can see that, so assessment briefs, let's talk about this. So I've got 3 questions here. We won't have time to talk about all of them in depth, and anything we don't have time to touch on, you're very welcome to add then your thoughts in the Padlet in a minute. So we've got 3 questions here. First of all, what challenges have you or your students faced with assessment briefs? And then how can you enhance your use of the assessment brief during the module, at the start, at the end, or throughout? And what enhancements added to the documents themselves, for example, videos, visual aids, would help students self-regulate? Now, because of the time that we don't have so much time, perhaps if one of you would like to answer one of the challenges, and then perhaps one of you how we can enhance the use, and one of you about the addition to the documents. The only problem is I cannot see you because I'm sharing. I only have one screen. So would you like to just speak up about the challenges with assessment briefs?
Should I go first then?
Yeah.
Sure. Actually, I have quite an interesting example of late. And I think that the key challenge is really with too much information provided on the assessment brief, because we do try to provide quite a lot of information on there to help students, to understand what they need to do, etc. But I had an instance with one module where the module leader was very clear, and was trying to help the students fully grasp a fairly complicated assessment, But the information that he provided, you know, and the way in which it was provided actually had the students create something completely different. So we're providing too much information,
Yeah.
even though what they created was actually of a lot of value, they left out the core aspect of the assessment. I don't know if you want the details of the assessment. Would that help?
I think just because of time, I don't think we have to, but it's very, very important and interesting point you're making, Catherine, because sometimes we're not talking about, you know, let's give the students so much detail so that they understand everything, because then it becomes cognitive load. And then the students actually, it might even confuse students because it's just too much in there. No, it's a very good point you raised. So I think you, if you want to share the example, you can put it in the chat, in the Padlet later, just because of time. Yeah, but it's very good. Thank you for raising that point. So yeah, sometimes to do with clarity, with usability. So how can we enhance? Let's imagine that we sorted out the formatting. Okay, now we've got a brief that is accessible, formatted well, not too long, clear. Right now, how can we enhance the actual use of that assessment brief during the module, at the end, at the start, throughout? So the students turn up, you've got your instructions of the assessment brief. Yeah, what do you do? So is any of you, Tola or Christina? Yeah.
I think, hello. So I think if we dedicate a bit of time, that class time, to going through the brief, so it could be at the start, ideally should be at the start, so that students know what to expect and probably use an exemplar assignment as well. Probably even have a list of do's and don'ts so that students know, okay, you cannot or you should not do this. That might help. I think also maybe referring to, during the sessions, referring to the brief as well, like as said in the brief, or, you know, kind of scaffolding all through the session as well, or the semester or term would help.
Very good. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Because often what happens is, a typical scenario is you present this assessment at the start. Okay, all clear, fine. Okay, then you forget about that. You get on with the module, with the term, semester, whatever it is that you call it, your unit. And then 2 weeks before submission, you're like, oh yeah, or maybe 1 week. Oh, maybe we should go back to that. And then just like you forgot about it, the students have completely forgotten about it. And so actually, ideally, every week you could make a link to that brief again and again and again. Because also I always think, well, as a student on day one, how much can you really fully grasp? How much can you grasp of that brief in potentially a subject or a module that is completely new to you? But what about in 5 weeks? What about in 6, 7 weeks? In fact, by the end of it, you probably really understand it. So that's the point, is going back. So now let's talk about that third one. What enhancements added to the documents themselves would help students self-regulate? Any of you can answer. I mean, Christina or Catherine or...
Well, I'm happy to share some of, the experiences that I've had with my students, because we teach a generation that is very much limited attention span, right? And they're used, because of social media, they're very used to videos. So I do find one of the things that I've done is provided videos, like maybe with an explanation of the brief, gone through it. It can't be too lengthy, because then we know that they lose their attention span. But especially when you're talking to international students or teaching international students, like in my case, sometimes English isn't their first language. So that video and re-watching that video in their own pace, at their own time, can really be helpful. So I think I found that beneficial. There is sometimes the fact that they don't watch it, because there is always that limitation. But overall, I'd say I found that very useful with some of my students.
Yeah, that's very good. Actually, I saw it done on the PG cert, because my students are teachers. And what they've done is, on the brief, they've put a QR code, especially either they give it printed or on the VLE, but the QR code links to a video, as you're mentioning, a video which talks through the brief, because sometimes for us it's obvious what is written. Oh yeah, very clear, but not necessarily for the students. And as you said, there might be barriers that we are not even totally aware of, why they might find that text, difficult to grasp. But you could have that. You could have a QR code linking to a video. So of course you have to make the video in advance, but it doesn't have to be long, just 5 minutes, and just talking about the gist and how you're giving your perspective of how you view this assessment, perhaps giving the big picture or something. So there are many enhancements we can give. That's actually, I think, a very interesting question, which many times is totally overlooked or dismissed by most busy academics. But that third question, what enhancements added to the documents themselves would help students self-regulate? And another thing, which is, to be honest, this is where the whole project started about assessment, is the fact that I've been doing on the PG Cert, I've been challenging my participants to create a visual roadmap. Actually, I presented this at the conference in Manchester. So not just providing the document, but alongside it, providing a visual roadmap of what the assessment is about, the elements, how they relate to each other, the timeline, and that can be literally invaluable. And the interesting thing I found, it wasn't just invaluable for the students, but it was invaluable for the staff, because we have to be honest, it's not said that the academics, inverted commas, delivering the brief are totally clear themselves about the brief. Sometimes they're not. And so this has actually helped the academics understand much better the different elements and how they relate to each other. So thank you so much. I'm going to, I think I have to stop sharing to go back to the, I need to stop sharing so that I can go back to the main, to now go to the second part, the assessment tasks, right? So how about the assessment task? Let me just see if I can, sorry. Okay. Because the main Padlet can basically be broken up into smaller Padlets so that we can just focus on that one aspect. Right, so let's talk about assessment tasks, which is really vital for students to understand. So we have 3 questions here as well. How can assessment design, in terms of the tasks themselves, support student self-regulation? So assessment tasks, the outputs from the students. Why is self-regulation important in formative summative assessment? Can you give an example of formative and summative task that has worked well on your module in terms of supporting self-regulation? And how do your formative tasks mirror or differ from summative assessments to support self-regulation? And to discourage unethical use of AI as well. That's a very interesting one. So we've got 3 questions. Actually, I think what we can do is, if any of you, Christina, Tola, or Catherine, want to take any of the questions, just say which question you want to talk about, and you can talk about that one.
Well, I'm happy to start a little bit with the first one. I mean, I think one of the things that students obviously suffer from is anxiety, right? When it comes to assessments. So one of the things, one of the tasks that one thing that I've done actually is help them with a project plan, right? Because I think that if we make sure that they are doing something on a week by week basis with a Gantt chart or project plan, then they don't panic towards the end, right? And that can really help them, and one thing that I always tell the students is, if you follow the lessons, you will see that the lessons are structured in a way to bring you to working every week to achieve your assessment without panicking.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Catherine or Tola, want to add something? Or another question? Take another question.
Well, yes, I kind of tie that in very much closely with Hitagoji rather, where they learn to study themselves, and I personally use flipped learning so that they're able to go themselves to learn about the content before they come into the session. So I think one of the things that we could do is that repetition, but not just that as well, that they're building and synthesizing information themselves or knowledge, but they synthesize knowledge, but they kind of build the knowledge up to that level where they understand. So it's helps with the scaffolding that I mentioned earlier as well. So one of the things I do for formative is weaving that back into the assessment brief, is to kind of build through. So some of their tasks would be very linked to the summative, so that they kind of have a feel of it, but they've done it themselves as well. They've gone to think about it themselves.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Sorry, just I'm just thinking, I don't want to take it for granted that we all share this language, because sometimes some language is more UK based, but summative and formative refer to the fact that summative usually is the end point and graded, and the one that sort of counts towards the final outcome. Formative would be intermediary steps, or could be a draft, but it could be something else that is done in between to help and support that process, but it's not actually graded or final endpoint assessment, just to clarify for everybody. Catherine, did you want to add anything on any of the questions? 1, 2, or 3?
Apologies. Yes, I think with flipped learning, it's quite a difficult one, because not all the students actually engage with the process. So it's about and that is actually very, very key to the self-regulation context that we are looking at. So it's about making sure that we are providing activities, flipped activities that are interesting to the students, contextualized to maybe their life world, contextualized to something relevant to their cultures and so on. But self-regulation is extremely important in both formative and summative, because it's about the students coming to recognize what they need to work on when, because some of them will be better with some tasks, and with other tasks they'll need more time to sort of get through them. So I think what Christina mentioned is actually really important, the project plan, because in that way they can sort of relate that project plan to their strengths and weaknesses, and align them much better in that way. So yeah, I think it's, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, and for example, as an example of what this formative could be, I mean, obviously it depends so much on your discipline, on the level, and what is the final assessment, what's the end assessment. Obviously, through the formatives usually are trying to scaffold the abilities and skills that they will need for that final endpoint one. But for me, for example, on the PG cert, although I do have sort of different formatives sort of on the way, but a very important one is the draft submission. I know it sounds a bit boring, but it's an absolute lifesaver, because by giving them the chance of submitting a draft before the final and actually receiving formative feedback, which is not just from me, is the peers, etc., then that makes a huge difference. And then I always tell them, take the draft feedback, the draft deadline, as pretend it's the final deadline, work towards that, and then you will have the time to just improve it. So that's just one easy way for anybody. Most people can do that. But formative tasks can be more interesting when they build one aspect, and it could be a presentation, it could be even a journal, a video, anything that can support students understand even better and sort of get closer to what the final assessment asks. So thank you so much. Just because of time, I think I have to quickly go to the next one. So the next one is feedback, right? So feedback for self-regulation. Let me just copy that one. Okay. Right. So let's see what feedback practices we can share. So feedback, we have 3 questions. What challenges do you face in getting students to act on feedback, and what strategies work? How do you encourage feedback dialogue? For example, self-assessment, peer response, feed-forward tasks to support self-regulation. And how do you personalize feedback, including for neurodivergent or diverse learners? So any of you pick any question and feel free to comment on it. Yeah, Christina, you want to?
Go ahead, Tola, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of the challenges, I think one of the things as a lecturer would be making sure that the feedback gets to them in good time so that they can act on it, you know. But also, I think getting them to be confident in using the feedback as well is very important. So, what I do is use peer feedback as well, so that they get it from someone who is in their shoes as well. And when they hear from a peer, then they're able to think, okay, maybe you know the lecturer is not being too hard on them, or you know, is not seeing it's seeing it in their perspective. So one of the things that could help it would be peer feedback, but also that for neurodivergent learners, I think, sorry, that's going into 3, but helping them to act on the feedback will be giving them that extra time. So one of the things I do as well is give them that immediate feedback, you know, just what do you think, or ask them questions, what do you think, you know, you could have done better. So it helps them self-reflect. And then also it's kind of an immediate feedback. I also sometimes diversify the type of feedback. So sometimes I use audio, sometimes, you know, it's typed up, or I've attempted to use video once. You know, it's just to give them that different kind of feedback, and sometimes make it less formal so that they're able to accommodate the changes as well.
Very good. Yeah, feedback modes. Yeah, they can be really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Tola. So, Christina, Catherine, you want to add?
Yeah, just to add a little bit to what Tola was saying, especially for neurodivergent students. I mean, one thing that I do, which is very simple, I end the lesson about 20 minutes early, because I see that sometimes students don't always feel comfortable to ask questions in a group. So I leave that last 20 minutes for one-to-ones. And I do that every lesson, because I always see, you know, students who maybe struggle a little bit, and they do want to talk to you on a one-to-one basis. And I find that that verbal feedback sometimes is really what they're looking for.
That's so good. That's so good. Thank you. Any final thoughts from Christina? Sorry, from Catherine.
I mean, I would agree with both Tola and Christina, especially with regards to different modes of feedback. But using the marking rubrics for peer review and peer assessment is also very important, because they come to understand how they're going to be assessed before they're actually assessed on that rubric. So I do sort of integrate a number of activities where students can actually either use the marking rubric on past assessments, examples of past assessments, to, you know, work in groups to assess that and mark that using that rubric, or on the formatives, you know, depending on how that formative relates to the summative assessment. I find that actually students can be quite hard and harsh with each other when they're marking using rubrics, which is actually quite interesting, because if we marked on that basis, you know, none of them will get first. Yeah, definitely the marking rubrics are so important.
Yeah, that's so important, because we are trying to, the self-regulation is if they can understand that it's not just our gut instinct, we actually using criteria, and the more they can understand and just practice using those criteria, the more they can, of course, self-regulate when it comes to the summative and final. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to you wonderful colleagues. And what I'm going to do, just because I'm aware of time, I've now put the link in the of the overall Padlet. So I'm going to just stop. And I would like to ask everybody, please, can you have a go at clicking on it to see if you can open it without any problems? And the Padlet has got all of those questions. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to just take a moment, give you the chance to add your own ideas to any of those, or there is a final column, anything else regarding self-regulation and assessment. So basically, feel free to browse, to add, just in case you're not familiar, I'm sharing it. For example, assessment briefs, I've got 3 questions here. If you want to add an idea, then you click on the plus. But if you want to answer to any of those questions, then you just add comment. You click on add comment, and that adds to that question. That makes sense, yeah? So maybe I just go quiet for everybody's benefit. And I'll give you maybe 8 minutes or something for you to add your thoughts to the Padlet. Anybody, everybody is welcome to have a look. I think it's anonymous, so you don't have to worry about, anything when you add your ideas. Right, so I'll come back on the microphone in, about 8 minutes or so. Yet, sorry. And yet, I think we all share very common challenges and like maybe common gaps that we find in assessment practices and feedback. Yeah, I think what would be really interesting is this comment that Gillian put. To what extent do students worry about how their self-assessment will lead or direct the instructor's assessment? It's such a good question. I wonder if anybody wants to comment on that, because we're all thinking about the students, doing their self-assessment, but if they give themselves a negative feedback, let's say, will that affect and influence the instructor perception, obviously to their detriment, So what do you reckon? Gillian, you replied again, yeah? Yeah, does anybody want to say? Yeah, Catherine, yeah. Did you want to say? No. Jenny, yeah, you want.
I thought it was a really interesting comment. I read it as well. And one thing I wondered was how you could use this reflection to connect to what I think it was an eager badger. I do enjoy Padlet's names. Was saying about creating dialogue and have it emphasize to the student that it's not they say one thing about assessment, you say something else, but in fact that you're talking to each other. And have that be the framing of their approach. So it's not like they can get in trouble or anything. It's literally like the opening bit of a conversation.
Yes,
so I thought they could connect.
Exactly. It's a dialogue. And also the point I made is the fact that for me, I'm interested in them engaging with those criteria, just engaging with the system assessment so that they can actually understand it. Because the more they understand it, especially at formative stage, the more likely they are to understand and succeed at summative stage, where we can give all the feedback we want, but there won't be much of an opportunity to apply it to that submission. So that's why the formative is so important, because it's that safety net. Yeah, but thank you, Gillian, for mentioning that. So we've got 4 minutes left, I think, but there's just so much in this Padlet. I'm afraid I won't be able to read all of the comments, but thank you so much, and I will definitely read them later. I've already read most of them and thinking about them as well. But maybe what would be nice is just to finish with, if there's any particular one question or something that we could discuss, any point there that maybe puzzles you or inspires you, or even if it's a comment, it doesn't have to be a question. It can be a comment that anybody wants to offer. Don't be shy.
Okay. What is your position, Virna, on the idea of over-assessing students? I mean, I think that's a real problem that we need to sort of address. Are there other ways of going about things?
Yeah, I think that, well, I wonder if the other countries have got this issue, but I think sometimes it's very difficult to strike that balance because you've got your learning outcomes and then you could end up in a situation where everything the student does, you would like to, tie or take as assessment, and you end up something that perhaps only needs one assessed output becomes so many. I think for me, the solution, inverted commas, is what has now been called more and more programmatic assessment. And I think that's the biggest issue, the fact that sometimes we just don't have that big picture. So programmatic, I mean, at least the whole of the course level. and maybe being aware of where the pinch points are. Because if everybody, if they are following 3 different modules or courses or units, depending on where you are in the world, and then the assessment is in week, 10 for all of them, well, they have to find shortcuts to survive. We would do the same. And then the quality obviously goes down. So I think understanding what the outcomes are and really having a realistic appraisal, like what really do we need for us to see those outcomes, and at which point can we put that, and how can we avoid those pinch points where everything is gathered at once. So I actually think that having at least 2 assessed elements is always good, because it avoids that 100% weight always right at the end. But that's why the formative assessment regime is so important. And maybe if there was a way, that's how I do it. The formative is actually part of the summative. If they don't do it at that stage, they can do it later, but I give them a deadline. So I'll say, week 3, 4, 5, whatever, this is the deadline for this formative task. I will give you feedback at this point if you submit it. But that is literally directly linked to the final, and that helps them. So I don't think there is a magic bullet. I think we just have to all ask ourselves, what is the output that will show me the outcomes? And what's the best time for a formative in relation to that? And how can I avoid the 100% massive weight at the end? At least 2, I think, assess points would be very good. Doesn't mean have to be both graded, but at least having that possibility, because my schooling was all 100% at the end, all of it. And I think that not everybody copes very well with that system. And I think it becomes over-assessment can be during, if we have too many assessment points, but it also becomes when everything is bunched at the end. But that's a conversation we can have because we are in the same institution later on. I'll be very happy to pursue it more, because it's true, we don't have time to really chat about this. So Jenny, I can see the time. I can see it's 3 p.m.
Yes, it is 3 p.m. I think, though, one of the nice things about the MYFest is that there is that Discord. So if you go back up in the chat, or Yasser and I can put it again now, we have a Discord, which is an asynchronous way to keep this conversation going. So if Virna, if you and your colleagues want to join, and then people can keep talking at the same time. Yes, thank you, Yasser. I want to really strongly encourage everyone to fill in the feedback form. It helps us understand whether you enjoyed yourselves, what the approaches that worked for you were and weren't, and everything like that. So it will only take a minute, we promise. But other than that, I think we'll go ahead and thank our panel and everyone who contributed. And that was quite a fun palette. So thank you, Virna.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And it was absolutely brilliant. So we'll go ahead and pause the recording. I'm just like Virna in that I can never find anything on Zoom. So I'm quietly depending